You spend hours watching game shows just to laugh, to entertain yourself, to temporarily forget about reality. Yet sometimes, the person making you laugh on TV is someone who is actually killed in real life. That's why today, we're going to talk about every murderer who has ever appeared on a game show. The Case of John Cooper. Bullseye was a British television show centred around the game of darts. In May 1989, a Welshman named John Cooper appeared on the programme. Cooper seemed friendly on the show and talked about his passion for scuba diving, but in reality, he was hiding a far darker secret. The story begins with John William Cooper, who was born on September 3rd, 1944, in Milford Haven, a town in Pembrokeshire, southwest Wales. Cooper grew up in a difficult environment. His parents divorced early, and he lived with his mother in a cramped house. As a teenager, he became involved in petty crimes such as stealing bicycles. His schooling was half-hearted, and he dropped out early to work on local farms. In 1966, at the age of 22, Cooper married Patricia Cowley, a woman he had met at a dance hall. They later had two children, Adrian and Teresa. At first, the marriage appeared normal, but Cooper quickly revealed his violent nature, beating his wife and children, exercising strict financial control, and forcing his children to work from a young age. He once shot a chick in front of his son as a lesson, and on another occasion, he smashed a pig with a hammer without hesitation. By the early 1970s, Cooper had begun a series of systematic burglaries in Pembrokeshire, breaking into isolated rural homes to steal money, jewellery, and miscellaneous items. In 1978, he won £90,000 from a newspaper spot the ball competition, along with a car, a massive sum equivalent to £500,000 today. However, a gambling addiction quickly drained his winnings, and failed real estate investments left him deeply in debt. His crimes escalated, and on December 22nd, 1985, he committed his first known murders. Siblings Richard and Helen Thomas, owners of Scoverston Manor Farm, near Milford Haven. Cooper had broken into steal but was discovered, so he shot Richard multiple times in the chest and head at close range with a shotgun, then shot Helen. To cover his tracks, he tied up the bodies, stole small valuables, and set the house on fire. The charred remains were found by neighbours a few days later. At first, police believed it to be an accidental fire, but an autopsy revealed clear signs of violence. With no witnesses, the case went cold. 4 years later, in May 1989, Cooper appeared on Bullseye, the popular dart show hosted by Jim Bowen. With his friendly manner, short hair, moustache, and Welsh accent, he attended with his wife Pat and a friend, introducing himself as an unemployed welder, passionate about scuba diving, showing off his knowledge of the Pembrokeshire coastline. Only weeks later, on June 29th, 1989, Cooper murdered his second pair of victims, Peter and Gwenda Dixon, tourists from Oxfordshire who were walking along the Pembrokeshire coastal path, the very area he had mentioned on TV. He confronted them in a remote spot near Little Haven, threatened them with a gun, tied Peter's hands behind his back, and demanded the PIN for their bank card. He withdrew £300 from an ATM and then shot Peter 3 times, and Gwenda between 2 and 5 times in the face and chest. After the Dixon murders, Cooper continued his crimes. In March 1996, he attacked a group of 5 teenagers in a Milford Haven woodland at gunpoint, pulling hair and raping a 16-year-old girl. Fortunately, the victim survived and reported the attack to the police, providing a description of him. In 1998, he was arrested and sentenced to life in prison without parole for 4 murders and the rape. The story of Sefer Çalınak. In 2014, a Turkish reality television program called Luck of the Draw became the centre of a scandal when a 62-year-old man named Sefer Çalınak appeared on stage in search of a new wife. With a gentle smile and a calm voice, he introduced himself as an honest man looking for true love. However, just minutes later, the entire studio fell silent when Çalınak bluntly revealed his past. Sefer Çalınak was born around 1952 in rural Turkey. His life began with what seemed like a romantic love story. At 17, Çalınak fell deeply in love with Fadime, his cousin. When Fadime's family tried to force her to marry a widower, the young couple ran away and secretly wed, hoping to build a happy life together. The happiness was short-lived. After about 5 months of living with Çalınak's family, he began to suspect that Fadime had changed and was betraying him, as a man who had once sought to marry her frequently visited the village. Consumed by blind jealousy, Çalınak killed Fadime. After the first murder, Çalınak was arrested and sentenced to nearly 14 years in prison, but served just over 4.5 years thanks to a government amnesty program. Upon release, he married a second time and had 2 children, but that marriage ended in divorce. Unwilling to give up on love, Çalınak began a relationship with a married woman he called Coquette. During a heated argument, believing he was being used and that the woman had once tried to kill him, Çalınak struck her with an axe and killed her. He was sentenced to an additional 6 years in prison but was again released early under legal provisions. In total, he served about 14 years for both murders. After his second release, Çalınak lived alone and was often abandoned by women once they learned of his criminal past. He described himself as a victim of fate and claimed he had changed, insisting he was always transparent about his past with potential partners to avoid being deceived or abandoned. The show's host, shocked to the core, immediately ordered him off the stage, while the audience reacted with a mix of outrage and morbid curiosity. The incident quickly spread through Turkish and international media, turning Çalınak into a symbol of murderers seeking fame through television. The program's producers admitted they knew about his past, but allowed him to participate because he had served his sentences. Meanwhile, Turkish media regulators called for complaints over the lack of contestant background checks. Despite being expelled from the show, Çalınak persisted in his search for love and vowed he would never kill again. The Case of Liu Hao. The story begins in 2004, when Liu Hao appeared on Wheel of Fortune, winning $17,500 and competing in the Mrs. Texas beauty pageant. She shared that becoming a good mother, wife, and worker was important to her. Doing all those things well is not easy, so basically, I'm like a ticking time bomb. That light-hearted comment on stage would later prove to be a grim prophecy when, in 2020, the bodies of her 2 children were found buried in her husband's backyard. Lori Noreen Cox was born in 1973 in San Bernardino, California, and grew up in a Mormon family alongside her brother Alex Cox. She married 4 times and had a daughter, Tylee Ryan, as well as an adopted son, Joshua J.J. Vallow, from previous marriages. In 2006, Lori married Charles Vallow, moved to Arizona, and cared for JJ and Tylee. Friends once described her as a devoted mother, but she gradually drifted away from the mainstream Mormon church and began reading books about the apocalypse. Chad Guy Daybell, born in 1968 in Utah, also came from a Mormon background and was the author of several apocalyptic prophecy books. He believed in reincarnation and divided people into categories of light and dark, with zombies being souls possessed by evil spirits. In 2017, Lori read Chad's books and came to believe she was a chosen goddess and that her children were zombies. In October 2018, Lori met Chad in person. They quickly developed a romantic relationship and formed the Church of the Firstborn group, which included Alex Cox. They began planning to remove anyone who stood in the way of their mission, including their current spouses and children. By 2019, in July, Alex Cox shot and killed Charles Vallow at Lori's home for unclear reasons. The incident was covered up as self-defense, and Lori collected a $150,000 life insurance payout. In late August, Lori moved near Chad's home in Idaho with Tylee, JJ, and Alex. On September 10th, Tylee and JJ were killed, and their bodies were hidden and buried in Chad's backyard. In October, Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell, was also killed. Lori and Chad then married on November 5th, 2019, in Hawaii, and continued to receive Social Security benefits for the children who were already dead. By late 2019 and early 2020, police discovered that JJ and Tylee had not been attending school, coinciding with suspicions surrounding Tammy's death. Authorities searched Chad's home, seizing 43 items, including cell phones and religious documents. On June 9th, 2020, after executing a search warrant, investigators found JJ and Tylee's remains buried in Chad's backyard. JJ wrapped in black plastic and tightly bound with duct tape. Tylee burned and dismembered. Both Lori and Chad were arrested the same day. The lengthy trial process continued for years. In May 2023, Lori was sentenced in Idaho to 3 consecutive life sentences without parole for the murders of JJ, Tylee, and the conspiracy to kill Tammy. In May 2024, Chad was sentenced to death after the court determined he was the mastermind behind the deaths of Tammy, JJ, and Tylee. The story of Edward Wayne Edwards. The story begins with Edward Wayne Edwards, who was born on June 14th, 1933, in Akron, Ohio, into a poor and unstable family. He never knew his biological father, and his mother, Mary Ethel Edwards, died just a few months after his birth, leaving him an orphan. At Palmerdale Children's Village, Edwards was abused, beaten, and mistreated, which fueled a personality full of resentment. As a teenager, Edwards quickly turned to crime stealing, robbing, and committing car thefts. He joined the Navy at 15, but was soon discharged for theft, pushing him deeper into a life of crime. During the 1950s, he repeatedly committed armed robberies and was arrested. In 1955, Edwards carried out a daring escape from the Mansfield Reformatory, becoming a dangerous fugitive. For years, he committed robberies across the United States under multiple false identities, landing himself on the FBI FBI's top 10 most wanted list in 1961. He was finally arrested in Atlanta in 1962 and sentenced to 16 years in prison, but served only 5. Upon release, Edwards unexpectedly transformed his public image. He married, traveled across the country, giving lectures about the path to redemption, and told stories of his criminal past to warn young people. He even published a memoir, Metamorphosis of a Criminal, in 1972 and appeared on the television show To Tell the Truth. To the public, he was a success story of reform. But behind closed doors, Edwards was abusive toward his wife and children, controlling them through fear. Beneath the facade, he continued killing. In 1977, he murdered young couple William Lavacco and Judith Straub in Ohio. 3 years later, in 1980, Edwards repeated the pattern with Timothy Hack and Kelly Drew in the Sweetheart murders in Wisconsin. Hack was stabbed to death, Drew was raped and strangled. In 1996, he killed his adopted son, Danny Boy Edwards, to collect $250,000 in life insurance. Over the decades, Edwards was suspected in numerous other murders, with some investigators even suggesting he might have been the Zodiac Killer or involved in the JonBenet Ramsey case, though these claims were never proven. The turning point came through his own daughter, April Bellacchio. After years of suspecting her father due to strange behaviours, like abruptly moving after local murders, April contacted the police in 2009. DNA from the 1980 murder scene matched Edwards, leading to his arrest at his home in Louisville, Kentucky on July 30th, 2009. At first, Edwards denied everything, but later confessed to 5 murders. In 2010, he was sentenced to death in Ohio. However, before the execution could be carried out, Edwards died of heart disease and diabetes at the Ohio State Penitentiary on April 7th, 2011, at the age of 77. The Case of Liu Hao. On the night of February 19th, 1998, in Chuaning District, Jilin City, Jilin Province, China, a sudden argument turned 26-year-old Wu Gang's life into tragedy. While drinking with friends and his younger brother at a small restaurant, Wu's group got into a dispute with the table next to them. When his brother was pushed to the ground and threatened, Wu, in a drunken rage, grabbed a sharp object and stabbed 24-year-old Sun Jun, the only son in his family. Sun died instantly, and Wu Gang became a murderer. Panicked, Wu fled the scene immediately and cut off all contact with his family. At the time, he had a wife and a 7-year-old son. To evade arrest, he changed his name to Liu Hao and began a 13-year journey on the run. During those years, he never stayed in one place for too long, constantly moving between provinces in northern China. To survive, Liu Hao worked many jobs, teaching music, organising weddings, and performing singing and dancing at small events. He built a public image of a cheerful, talented, sociable man to hide his true past. After more than a decade, Liu Hao believed the past was far behind him and that no one remembered the old case. In 2011, he decided to appear on Happy League, a popular dating show broadcast on Heilongjiang satellite TV. Hoping to find a new partner and rebuild his life, he stepped onto the stage with confidence. Liu Hao made a strong impression by singing and performing an energetic Running Man dance. His humour and vibrant personality won over the audience, and even one female contestant chose him as her dating partner. At 39 years old, he introduced himself as a music teacher and seemed to be enjoying his brief moment in the spotlight. But that moment became a trap. Liu Hao's face and mannerisms on television caught the attention of a particular viewer, a journalist who had once followed the old murder case. This person noticed the resemblance to fugitive Wu Gang and immediately contacted the Jilin police. Authorities launched an investigation using facial recognition technology to compare Wu Gang's 1998 photos with the man on the television show. The match was almost exact. Police devised a careful arrest plan posing as event organisers to invite Liu Hao to perform, then swooping in to detain him on June 9th, 2011. Under interrogation, Wu Gang admitted his true identity, detailing the 1998 murder and his years on the run. He confessed that he had joined the dating show, believing that time had erased all traces of his crime. A Chinese court sentenced Wu Gang to life imprisonment for murder. The case of Paul Curry. Paul Curry, born in 1957, was once known as a smart, ambitious nuclear engineer with a flair for television, having appeared on Jeopardy in 1989 and winning 2 consecutive episodes. Around the same time, he met 45-year-old Linda Kincaid, a successful woman working at the San Onofre nuclear generating station in California. At first, their romance seemed perfect. Curry, 13 years younger than Linda, was described by friends as romantic, funny, and attentive. In 1992, they married in Las Vegas, but within months, troubling truths emerged. Curry had hidden the fact that he had been married twice before, had 3 children, was heavily in debt, and had previously declared bankruptcy. More alarmingly, he pressured Linda repeatedly to transfer her assets and to purchase a $1 million life insurance policy with himself as the sole beneficiary. After their marriage, Linda began experiencing mysterious health problems, vomiting, diarrhea, and severe dehydration. Doctors suspected poisoning but could not identify the cause. On New Year's Eve 1993, Linda was hospitalized, and a nurse discovered her IV bag had been punctured and contained lidocaine, a drug that had not been prescribed. Although suspicion fell on Curry, Linda defended him, calling him caring and wonderful. Over the following months, her illness recurred several times. Each time she was hospitalized, medical staff suspected Curry was tampering with her medication. Friends such as Mary Siebold and ex-boyfriend Bill Sandretto warned her that he had clear financial motives, but Linda stayed. Then, on the night of June 9th, 1994, Curry called 911, saying his wife was having trouble breathing. Linda was rushed to the hospital but did not survive. She was 50 years old. An autopsy revealed nicotine levels in her body 50 to 100 times higher than those found in regular smokers, along with a large dose of the sleeping pill Ambien. Injection marks behind her ear deepened the suspicion. However, forensic technology at the time could not conclusively prove the method of poisoning, and Curry avoided prosecution. He quickly collected hundreds of thousands of dollars from Linda's life insurance and retirement benefits, remarried, and moved frequently. The case faded from public memory for nearly a decade. It was not until 2002 that Sergeant Yvonne Shull of the Orange County Sheriff's Department reopened the file. The new investigation revealed that one of Curry's ex-wives had also suffered similar, mysterious illnesses while he pressured her to buy life insurance. Modern toxicology experts confirmed Linda's cause of death as nicotine poisoning. All evidence pointed to Curry as the only person with both motive and opportunity. In 2010, Curry was arrested in Kansas. His trial began in September 2014 in California. Prosecutor Ebrahim Baitia argued that Curry had used his scientific knowledge to slowly poison Linda through her food and ultimately delivered a lethal injection. The jury took only one day to find him guilty of first-degree murder, with special circumstances poisoning for financial gain as well as insurance fraud. On November 14th, 2014, Curry, then 57, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case of Stephen Port. The story begins with Stephen Port, born on February 22nd, 1975, in Southend-on-Sea, Essex. He grew up in a middle-class family and had a lonely childhood, often bullied for his perceived differences. After dropping out of college, he became a chef and settled in Barking, East London, living quietly in a small flat. Port had no close friends, spent much of his time on eccentric hobbies, and led a reclusive life. In 2014, Port unexpectedly appeared on the reality TV show Celebrity MasterChef, leaving the impression of a cheerful cook. But since 2012, he had been using gay dating apps such as Grindr, Hornet, and Gaydar. Under false identities, Port sought out young, slim men, the type he was obsessed with. His goal was not love, but control, and the perverse thrill of drugging his victims with GHB, a dangerous date rape drug. On June 17th, 2014, Port committed his first murder. The victim was 23-year-old Anthony Wargate, a fashion student and part-time escort. After drugging and sexually assaulting him, Wargate died of an overdose. Port dragged the body outside and pretended to call the police as a passerby. Though questioned, he was convicted only of perverting the course of justice and received a suspended sentence. 2 months later, Port killed 22-year-old Gabriel Kovari, a young Slovak man newly arrived in London. His body was dumped in St Margaret's Cemetery. 3 weeks later, Port murdered 21-year-old Daniel Whitworth, staging the scene with a fake suicide note in which Whitworth supposedly took responsibility for Kovari's death. Police accepted the note and ruled it a suicide, ignoring suspicious evidence. In September 2015, Port killed his fourth victim, 25-year-old Jack Taylor. Taylor's body was left in the same cemetery. This time, Taylor's family refused to accept the police's quick conclusion. They pressured authorities to review the evidence and release CCTV footage, which showed Taylor meeting Port shortly before his death. These clues, along with testimonies from surviving victims, exposed Port. On October 18th, 2015, he was arrested. His computer and phone contained a trove of evidence. Searches about rape drugs, videos of sexual assaults, and handwriting matching the fake suicide note. The investigation revealed that Port had attacked a total of 12 men, killing 4 of them. His trial at the Old Bailey in 2016 ended with a sentence of life imprisonment without parole. The judge called Port an evil and depraved individual. In 2018, he appealed but was unsuccessful. He is currently serving his sentence at HMP Belmarsh. The Francois Verove case. The story begins with the haunting childhood of Francois Verove. He was born in 1962 in a small town near Lille in northern France. Verove grew up in an unhappy family. He was sexually abused by his biological father when he was only 10 years old. When he turned 18, he joined the gendarmerie force in 1983, and at the age of 21, he quickly learned how to use power, control techniques, and even official ID cards to hide himself. But instead of protecting the public, he exploited those very tools to become a monster. The first recorded case occurred in 1986, when Verove was only 24 years old. The victim was Cécile Bloch, an 11-year-old girl living in the 19th district of Paris. On the morning of May 5th, Cécile left home to go to school, but was stopped in the elevator by a man claiming to be a police officer. He had distinctive pockmarked skin on his face. He took the girl down to the basement, handcuffed her using police techniques, raped her, strangled her with a rope, and then stabbed her multiple times in the neck and chest. The body was wrapped in a carpet and hidden under a pile of cardboard boxes. Just 1 year later, in 1987, Verove continued his actions with increasing levels of violence. On April 29th, he targeted Gilles Politi, a 38-year-old aviation engineer, and Irmgard Müller, a 20-year-old German nurse working as an au pair. He stopped their car in Marne-la-Vallée, a suburb of Paris, posing as a police officer with a French 3-colour official ID and a communication radio. He forced them into his car, took them to a remote area, tied Gilles up using professional techniques, then tortured both by burning cigarettes on their skin, and raped Irmgard in front of Gilles. Finally, he killed Gilles with a garrote, then hung Irmgard from a tree and slit her throat. The bodies were left in horrifying positions, and he stole the victim's car and checks to go shopping. And from 1986 to 1994, Verove committed at least 31 suspected cases, including 9 murders and many rapes, mainly targeting children and vulnerable women. He raped an 8-year-old girl in 1986, holding her for 3 hours before releasing her, raped a 14-year-old girl in 1987, and continued with other victims like another 11-year-old girl. In 1990, he killed Gilbert Gaudry, a 43-year-old man, by tying the victim to a tree and shooting him with a Mac 50 gun. He often operated in Paris and the suburbs, taking advantage of rush hours to approach victims in elevators, car garages, or streets. Meanwhile, the investigation began to take shape. From 1986, the police collected descriptions from witnesses, a man with pockmarked skin, using police terminology like controlled identity, identity check, and having knowledge of legal procedures. They nicknamed him Le Grellet, based on his skin. DNA from semen, cigarette butts, and the victim's sanitary napkins was stored. In 2010, Judge Nathalie Turkey began interrogating about 750 former police officers and gendarmes in Paris, suspecting the perpetrator was from within the force, based on the control techniques and fake IDs. They took DNA from these people, but Verove, who had retired in 2000 due to injury, had not been summoned yet. Throughout this time, Verove lived a double life. After leaving the gendarmerie in 1989, he switched to being a local police officer in Montpellier, got married in 1992, had 2 children, and even joined the city council of La Grande-Motte. He stopped committing crimes after 1997, and in 2019, when Verove was 57 years old, he appeared on the French TV quiz show Tout le monde veut prendre sa place. He chatted cheerfully with the host Nagui, answering questions about history and culture, appearing comfortable in front of millions of viewers. No one recognised him as Le Grellet, the one the police were still hunting, and the downfall came in 2021. On September 24th, Verove received a summons from the judge to provide DNA related to the Cécile Bloch case. He was living in Le Grau-de-Roy in southern France at the time. 3 days later, on September 27th, he went missing. On September 29th, his body was found in a rented apartment. He had committed suicide by poison. Next to it was a long confession letter in which he wrote, "I was once a criminal with raging anger. I hate the criminal I once was. My actions cannot be forgiven." He admitted to the murders but did not provide specific details, and confessed to having controlled his impulses after therapy in 1997. DNA from the body matched at least 5 crime scenes, confirming he was Le Grellet. In 2025, further ballistics checks proved that his Mac 50 gun was used in the Gilbert Gaudry case. Alright, that wraps up today's video, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel to support us.